Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And I'm Steven.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast that just ends Doctor Who, because this week we watched Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children.
Written by Chris Chibnall.
Directed by Jamie Magnus Stone.
And aired on February 23rd and March 1st, 2020.
And we made it to March, the longest month of history.
The March to March.
Oh boy, that's what this past 6 years has just been for us. But yeah, hi, Steven, and thank you for
welcome.
joining us.
Yes. So, yeah, you guys time scooped me from a time before I watched Doctor Who ever, but thankfully my future self left me a transcript for me to read based on their listening of this episode after the fact. So how's 2020?
Well, invest. Whoa. In 2019, you want to make a large investment in PPE companies. You want to just trust me on this. This may seem counterintuitive, but invest all your money in PPE. Okay? That's what you want to do.
Trust is in the podcast name.
And I'm asking you to trust me now. Take my hand. As the master says.
I will take your hand in person.
Take my metaphorical hand over the internet. my Zoom raise hand feature hand.
But we're on Skype.
Well, oops.
Well, okay, so we made it. We're finally here at the end of this long journey.
Which officially
started
means
in 2014.
We've caught up officially with the show. We're there, boys.
And
girls who RG and all the other women who I assume listen to our podcast. Sad.
Well, okay, so, I was fully prepared to come on this episode and be like, I didn't think I would get emotional over this, but I'm actually, getting, somewhat choked up about, having caught up with Doctor Who and sort of being at the end of this era, but nope, I feel absolutely nothing.
It won't set in for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a month between me watching these for the first time and then watching them for the second time, and I didn't get more emotional, but yeah, I guess you could say I double played these episodes.
Check out Triple Play Movie Trilogy Podcast.
Or
the final episode of season 2 coming soon.
Double play, playing second fiddle to triple play.
Oh,
coming
God.
never.
You never know.
No, don't. No, Keon, you were the one who, when we started the Skype call, was like, we're literally barely keeping up with the 3 podcasts we have now, and 2 of them are seasonal.
And that's true. That's very true.
I always worry.
We can't do more.
I always worry when we have guests on that they'll become so disillusioned by like how ramshackle we really are behind the scenes that they'll just never see the show the same again. It's like a peek behind the curtain. Ignore the man behind the curtain kind of thing from Wizard of Oz.
I think it's pretty apparent. I think it's honestly pretty apparent.
Fair. I mean, you got me with that one. There's nothing more to say.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because, like, last time I guessed it on a podcast, like, toward the end, I was talking about Doctor Who and saying, I really need to catch up and watch the 13th Doctor's run. And then, like, the following week, I watched all of the 13th Doctor's run. So
Yowza.
full circle.
Full circle.
Oh boy.
Name dropping a better Doctor Who story, I see.
Oh, that was unintentional. I completely forgot that was a Doctor Who story.
Adric's first outing, his first introduction to the world.
And his
favorite.
best.
That might have actually been his best story, to be honest. Full Circle was actually a pretty good story.
It was. I don't know, Castrovalva was pretty good too. I mean, besides the fact that the Doctor was out of commission for 2 episodes.
But we got to see him levitate in the Zero Room in that one, right?
Yeah, but the Zero Room gets destroyed in that one, so they have to build the Zero Cabinet.
Can't gloss over the BDSM shenanigans with Adric either, you know. That's, just can't gloss over that.
Oh boy. Well, let's jump into this because Keon had a particularly spicy hot take that I think we should share right off the bat. So Keon, take it away.
Wait, what is it? Is it that I don't think this episode is really as controversial as people seem to think? Okay,
yes.
So I mean, if you're sort of keeping up with the Doctor Who fandom and whatnot online, this episode caused quite the uproar indeed, with how it supposedly rewrites, or according to some, retcons parts of Doctor Who, and I honestly just don't think it's a big deal. Like, it's not even that big of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that this past season has added or uncovered from the lore, depending on how you look at it. And some of it does make sense in the context of what we've seen before, but some of it kind of feels like a bit of a stretch. But overall, I agree, it's not as controversial as people make it out to be.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna agree with this. This is, I guess, Trust Your Doctor just breaking from the fandom again, but I don't really think that it was that world shattering as everybody made it out to be. I actually think kind of one of the messages of this, themes of this episode, I should say, is that it actually doesn't matter. The history of the Doctor just doesn't matter. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's very Rise of Skywalker in that sense, weirdly enough.
Doctor Who does...
You're right.
Like, some things in this season oddly remind me of, like, Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker's decisions.
Well,
like,
we already talked about Contact,
twist.
The long-distance...
Skype call.
Oh, God. Yeah, and I actually, I don't have any fully formed thoughts about this yet, but I actually think the Doctor's sort of secret past that we learn about in this episode has to do with the sort of transhuman and post-human themes that Dylan and I have been kind of picking up on throughout this season.
Or just, seeing where it's not there. I mean...
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have any fully formed connections between those two, but I'm going to try to make some at the end of this episode, so prepare yourselves.
Hell yeah.
But speaking of this episode and its end, if it ends, it also has to begin somewhere. So why don't we just dive in?
The end is the beginning.
So, fun fact, Attack of the Cybermen has the same acronym. Oh, I totally mixed that up. Ascension of the Cybermen has the same acronym as Attack of the Cybermen and Attack of the Clones.
Unless you just start including random letters like some acronyms do these days, so it could be ASOTC.
True.
We get yet another cold open to start this episode. Although this one is much shorter than the ones we've been getting in the past.
Right, so we're greeted by sort of narration. We're flying through space, and we're learning about how the Cybermen were defeated.
Yeah, there's a Cyberman head floating in space too. And there's this quote about how every empire has its time and every empire falls. I mean, that doesn't apply to the Daleks, it seems, but anyway.
And then do we get the title sequence here, or is that after we meet?
Yeah, no, we get it.
Brendan?
We get it here because we kind of zoom through the Cyberman Zion and zooms into the title sequence.
Yeah.
Huh.
We've been getting a lot of really experimental transitions this season, and this is one of them.
Well, I think that might actually have to do with how this season is a lot more meta and is a lot like closer to our reality, if that makes sense. Did you guys see the message from the Doctor, like Jodie Whittaker playing the 13th Doctor about
Which one?
the one about
Because she
one
released
about staying
two.
inside.
She released another one this past week, so there's two now.
No, I only saw the one about. I don't know if it just
so
touched on sort of everything that was going on.
Yeah, there's
right
the
now.
one where she's in the closet, where she's like, I'm stuck in this closet, you should stay home. And then there's the one she just released this week where she's in front of like a green wall and she's like, I'm the Doctor, and I'm telling you to stay home again.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. I didn't actually see the first one.
Oh, yeah.
I've only seen the first one.
Oh, weird. You each have only seen one and I've seen both.
Yeah, and that's also just another weird thing. Like she's not. That's not Jodie Whittaker in those videos. I mean, it is as an actor, but like that's the Doctor. It's supposed to be the 13th Doctor, like giving us those messages.
Well, also, like, there's been a lot of short stories released in this time period to, I guess, keep people interested.
Busy.
Obviously, there's the Rose prequel and sequel and that, and then there's the story that implies that Doctor Who takes place inside the Doctor Who universe from, who wrote it now?
Are you talking about Press Play?
Yes. Who wrote that one? Well, Keanu put it in the show notes. But then there's also the one that Moffat wrote, where Moffat, writing for the 13th Doctor for the first time, that like implies the Doctor is a real character in our world because there's a kid who's watching Doctor Who and like meets the Doctor and he's like, you're fictional. And she's like, yes. And he's like, so how are you real? And she's like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, well,
But we don't know that like we can't like prove that the Doctor isn't actually real. Like that's a scary thing about Doctor Who is like there's no way to actually say like this shit isn't all just real.
but that's like the weird thing is that that's not even like new because throwback to Feast of Stephen where the first Doctor just turns to the camera and goes, and Merry Christmas to all of you at home, and you're like, whoa, is he aware like of our universe? Like what?
Well, a few years ago, there was an 11th Doctor one-shot comic where he goes to a universe where Doctor Who is a TV show and he meets Matt Smith. So maybe the Doctor knows that there is a parallel universe that watches their universe as a TV show.
Oh, God.
Well, okay, so in this episode, we actually learn that the Doctor isn't from Gallifrey and that she's actually from another universe. So
Allegedly, again, like this is something I want to talk about is that we get all the story, like the Master tells the story, and like who's to say the Master's just not just lying through his teeth right now? Like nothing.
yeah.
Nothing. And it's not like the Master hasn't just blatantly lied before, because that's like most of his characters that he does that, except for the Missy incarnation, who is like the most truthful of every Master we've had.
True enough.
So
Guess they left a way for them to write themselves out of a corner if the backlash got too intense.
yeah, I actually have a lot I want to talk about in regards to the revelations and everything, but I'm gonna save them for the end of the episode because we need to get there. We need to set it up first.
Right. So how this episode actually goes about setting things up is with a baby.
Being found
Right.
on a doorstep.
Or just like in the middle of a road.
Nowhere. Yeah.
And then brought to like so essentially this guy finds a abandoned baby and takes him home and they start raising him.
Right.
It's like how the Grinch was found as a baby when he arrived in Whoville and the live action How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
So you're saying the Grinch is the Doctor. Nice.
I mean, Whoville, so yeah.
Suspicious.
The timeless child is the Grinch.
Well, it is the timeless children, but we
Whoa,
only see
whoa.
one child.
Well, I think it's because the Doctor's DNA was supposedly in all the Time Lords. But hang on a second. So at the end of the Grinch, his heart grows 2 sizes. So
Maybe it splits into 2.
Exactly. Oh God, these connections run deeper than we thought.
Throw the child from the Mandalorian into the mix while you're at it.
Oh no. Oh no.
Dr. Seuss.
Well, okay, back to the episode. My notes go, wait, WTF is this?
Did I watch the wrong episode?
I almost thought I recorded the wrong thing, but then I remembered the intro sequence.
Yeah, my next note is I guess they will just take care of this Brendan forever. I think I wrote baby at first and changed it to Brendan so I'd know what his name was when we were talking. All right.
Yeah.
Because they adopt the baby. We didn't actually explain that. They find the baby. The policeman's like, I don't know if you can keep this baby. We have to find its parents. And then the next scene is they adopt the baby because they didn't find the parents. So there you go.
Right. We see Brendan sort of growing up. We see him grow from like a newborn essentially to a small child and such.
Yeah. And we'll see Brendan again throughout throughout Ascension of the Cybermen. But first, we have to go to a rock quarry. Yes. Yes. We're back. It all comes full circle.
Yeah, people talk about how this era is a return to form with the classic show, and they're right. They're right.
Gotta drive out all that new Who garbage that they added, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Bring back cereals.
Okay, I wouldn't go that far.
No more romances ever.
Yeah, that would probably...
Unless it's with writing out the female companions unexpectedly. That's what we want on Doctor Who.
More alien companions.
Yeah. Yaz is not allowed to leave unless she gets married off.
I almost took a sip of water, but advised against it because I knew a laugh was coming.
So apparently there's only 7 humans left on this side of the universe, and they're all in this rock quarry.
Yep. So the Doctor and all go down to meet them. They have some sick anti-Cyberman equipment, like the particle projector, which projects gold particles into the air.
I really thought you were going to make the joke that I'm going to go for, but it's the time flow analog.
It all comes full circle. This episode honestly did, in a way, feel like a greatest hits of Doctor Who, and was honestly a very fitting episode to end our run and catch up of the show on.
I mean, I agree. There's that scene where the Doctor overwhelms the Matrix with her memories, and we see like all sorts of crazy stuff from the classic show, and the wiki's got a list, and I just want to throw this out there in case I forget to mention it later, but Scylla's apparently in there. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, and I have in my notes that one of the people here say that they want to fight, and then the Doctor says, it won't be a fight, it'll be a massacre.
It all comes full circle.
Massacre.
I have that too. That's how you know it's going to be a disaster.
You might say that dinner tonight's going to be a national disaster.
Oh no, I forgot about that.
You might say it's master-cur.
Oh boy.
We should just try to fit as many references to classic episodes in this episode as we can.
But you got to do it subtly, not like how we always reference Tagana just by throwing him in.
Doctor Who and the Silurians.
Oh, yeah, great. Nice.
That felt very organic.
So the Doctor is like, okay, this will hold off the Cybermen, but then instead of sending Cybermen, Ashad being the lone Cyberman, decides to send in cyber drones, which are just Cybermen heads a la Handles in the Time of the Doctor, who just fly around and shoot laser beams out of their eyes.
Right, so really finding a loophole there.
Yeah.
Well handled.
Oh no! Oh no! So I think slightly before this, the Doctor actually has a conversation with the leader of the group, whose name I don't remember, and he tells her, actually, he explains Russell T's wet dream, which is that
oh no,
they're all
that
just
Rose
normal...
Tyler's coming back.
We haven't had a let her go Chris Chibnall moment yet.
Not yet, but
that's because Chibnall is so willing to just like have consequences matter.
Chibnall's so willing to just kill off his own characters. Anyways,
so the guy in charge explains Russell T's wet dream, which is that they're all just normal people in crazy sci-fi scenarios. And that's why they can't fight back, because he does explain that they had, up until this point, had just been running instead of fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And had wound up in Britain. Oh, I guess they were always in Britain because they all have British accents, but whatever. Don't mind me just being wrong.
Well,
so yeah, that's when the Cybermen attack and all goes haywire.
And a couple people die. So
including the leader guy.
It's probably why you don't remember his name, because he's dead now.
Yeah. But the one character who survives and I think really matters in the long run is Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
Who actually tries to sacrifice himself for the leader guy, but fails.
Yeah, because he's like, I'm the only one here, like, just leave, and Ashad is like, you're lying, and just blows up the box that the leader's hiding behind, and the Doctor runs in and distracts Ashad so that Ethan can escape. They have this problem where they're not going to be able to make it to the TARDIS in time, and I'm like, why the bloody hell did you park so far away again?
And this is where they do cyber shuttle theft auto, right?
Well, yeah, some of them do this, because what happens is they split up, because the Doctor tells all the humans to, like, run away, and she's like, I'll find you later, like, just go, and she sends Graham, Yaz, and Ryan with them, but they get separated in the attack, because there's, like, an explosion in front of Ryan behind Yaz, so Ryan gets stuck behind, and the ship takes off, and Graham and Yaz are like, we gotta go back for Ryan, and the new leader, whose name I forgot, she's like, no, we can't go back, like, we gotta leave now, or we're dead. Basically. So Ryan and the Doctor get Ethan, and they steal a cyber shuttle, because the Doctor's like, this is the only plan I got because I parked the TARDIS so bloody far away.
But luckily Ethan knows how to, like, hotwire a Cyberman ship, so they're all good.
Well, doesn't the Doctor hotwire a ship, and she says she used to do this on weekends as a teenager, and then she says, not that we had weekends or teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
So, like, do Time Lords not, like, just skip over, like, teenagehood, or...
Well, this episode actually kind of brought that into focus for me, because, when we, just to kind of skip ahead a little bit, we actually see, the so-called first regeneration, and it's a child regenerating into a child, so, like, that kind of put the idea in my head that... Time Lords do age. They do, like, start as children and eventually grow into adulthood. But all their regenerations sort of fit into that. in that they like, a child regenerate into a child or perhaps someone like a bit older and so on. And obviously we've seen that can kind of sometimes go backwards, with
Peter Capaldi to
Hartnell,
Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, we've seen a child regenerate into a child before, because we saw young River Song regenerate into other young River Song. Child River Song regenerate into child River Song.
Right.
Which, like, that was the one thing in this episode that doesn't reconcile, is the idea that River Song gained the power to regenerate because she was, like, born in the time vortex, but the Time Lords had to do it by, like, stealing genetic code from... Or the Shibogans had to do it by stealing genetic code from this alien from another universe.
Well, they didn't have access to the time vortex before
true.
They met a timeless child. They only developed that afterwards.
That's true.
So I wonder
if there's a section of Time Lords who developed the ability to regenerate naturally because they were born like in the time vortex or conceived around the time vortex once the Time Lords had access to that technology. Like maybe that's how the timeless child gained her ability, because she was a girl originally, to regenerate, is because she was born in the time vortex, and then she fell through the gateway into our universe. And she's actually just she's also a genetic anomaly to her species because interesting.
Yeah, like so much of this era, I think this episode leaves you with a lot more questions than it does answers.
Yeah. That was one of the complaints people had, was well, there's no mystery anymore, all the questions are answered. And I'm watching this episode, I'm I have a lot more questions than I did before. These are a lot of things I just hadn't even thought about. No one necessarily even cared about before this episode. All this history, and now I know, but now I have so many more questions about how it all works.
Yeah, even the second time watching these, there were still some questions I had.
Not to mention the fact that it ends on a huge cliffhanger.
Not only does it end on a huge cliffhanger, it ends on a second huge cliffhanger by revealing that the Daleks are coming back in the next episode. And how is that going to fit in? So yeah, this is when they steal the cyber ship, and Ashad is well, we'll just chase them with the other cyber ship. And I kind of have to wonder why the Doctor didn't just blow the other ship up while they were escaping, while they were at it. Would have solved actually basically every problem they had in this episode.
Yeah, beats the heck out of me. But we're actually taken back to 1900 or whenever Brendan is alive, whatever time period this is.
Well, so I think the Brendan scenes are in the Matrix.
Yeah, they are. They're like a visual filter that was put in place, and it's the stuff that happens to Brendan is essentially what happens with the Doctor, originally.
Yeah, the timeless child.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, so I didn't get that. Wait, so...
Because Brendan is the child who is found by a family and adopted by them, and then we have the scene where Brendan falls off the cliff and he comes back to life. That's supposed to be the analog for the first regeneration, because the timeless child falls off the cliff and she regenerates.
Yeah.
And that's why at the very end, when they're watching the scene where Brendan gets taken inside and he kind of gets tortured, the Master's what did they do to you, Doctor? And then there's, on the back of the clock, there's the thing about for services for the division, because they're clearly hiding this story behind this quote benign unquote story of this guy in this old British town.
Right, but so that was all. I thought that was all just happening again, and just happened to parallel, what happened, in the Doctor's origin story, but was happening again to her / Brendan.
No, the Master says all that is a visual filter put over the stuff that happened with the timeless child.
Huh. Interesting.
That's why there are some really close parallels between Brendan's story and the timeless child story.
There are also shots in Timeless Children that have the timeless child, and then we see the exact same scene playing out from Brendan's point of view from Ascension of the Cybermen. With the same framing and everything.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't pick up on that.
Mind blown.
Well, that's perhaps more interesting than what I thought it was. I thought it was just the Doctor living out these events yet again.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, the Matrix is, as we learned in like the Deadly Assassin, like every Time Lord consciousness stored in this massive computer. So all of these memories that the Doctor's got somewhere would be stored in the Matrix at some point, which is why they have to hide it, because the Master's like, this would topple Time Lord society if we all knew about this. So it all has to be hidden away, which is, I guess, why the visual filter is placed over it. Like, it's just some guy, it's just Brendan in a town. That's what it is, guys, definitely. So it's like writing a fictional story that's actually just your autobiography, but you changed all the characters and like changed the setting a little bit. You know, that's kind of what's happening here.
A lot of people do.
So you have read my novel then.
But yeah, we get the scene where Brendan falls off a cliff and you're like, I guess Brendan's dead, but then he just comes back to life and you're like, well, that's kind of weird.
Also paralleling. So, okay, one other reason why I thought this was just a parallel thing that just happened to be another sequence of events that mirrored, the story of the Timeless Child is that the very first thing that happens with the 13th Doctor is that she, almost a third, but the very first thing that happens with her is that she falls off of like out of the TARDIS, a super long distance and regenerates, which is kind of what happens, to Brendan and the Timeless Child.
Also, what happened to the 4th Doctor?
Yeah, yeah.
That moment.
I mean, if you had to rank like all of the regenerations from like least exciting to most exciting, I think 6th Doctor banging his head on the console is like least exciting, but then like falling off the Legopolis telescope is pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close to most exciting, I would say.
Yeah, right.
Stay away from telescopes, kids.
So we go back, and now the Doctor and gang. So we find out that the humans are trying to make it to this thing called the Gateway, which is apparently like it opens up every I don't know what they say, but when it does, it like has a random destination point on the other side. So they're like, this is the only way to escape the Cybermen, like for the longest time possible, because they'll have no idea where we went. Which, I mean, you could get really unlucky and maybe the Gateway opens, it's just like the planet next door, and you're like, wow.
Back on Earth.
So the Doctor, Ethan, and Ryan make it there well ahead of the other people because they run out of power in a Cyberman graveyard, basically. And
in space.
And they come up with this insane plan to like vent some of the air to propel them towards this mostly intact Cyberman ship that they can steal. Which,
yeah, the ship is massive. We should mention, like it's not like a small ship like the one they're on. It's actually huge.
And it works by some miracle. It works.
Right. Now, there's something I kind of want to bring up here. We get a lot of dialogue and conflict between some of the story-specific characters in this scene. Did you guys enjoy that? Because I thought the characters in this story were actually pretty weak.
Like which bits of dialogue do you mean?
Just sort of, they're all deciding what to do. They don't want to follow Graham and Yaz, because they've just met them, don't trust them, etc. But there's the one guy, the sort of taller guy, who, is more nervous than the others, and then there's I don't remember anyone's name from this. There's the leader, second in command.
Well, you're not alone on that.
Yeah. And I don't know, I just thought they weren't, like, interesting characters in any way. I mean, I guess the focus of this was all just sort of leading up to what happens in the Timeless Children, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I just felt they were very boring and didn't really have anything to them.
I mean, I did like when one of them said that, like, she called Graham strange after he says that whole let's have a butcher phrase, and she's like strange is good, and I don't know, I kind of like that. But I can't remember her name, so I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe there's more to these characters than I'm remembering or giving them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, just thinking back to like some early characters in the Chris Chibnall era, like even the frickin' guard in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, like had a character, even though he was on screen for all of 20 seconds before he died. And like I don't know, I feel these characters are even weaker than that guard. But hey, whatever.
And I think most of their character comes from their interactions with Graham and Yaz.
Right. That's what I mean. Overall, I haven't actually said this explicitly up until this point, although maybe it's obvious. Like, I actually didn't think this was a great story. Like, it was okay, it wasn't bad, but overall, I didn't really care for these two episodes as much as some people probably do.
I do think the second one dragged on in places, but it played better the second time around knowing what was coming.
Oh, did it? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but there are still a couple places where it felt a little bit dragged out even on the second time. But we'll get there.
So yeah, they make it to the boundary,
Yeah.
and they find what's his face. This guy's name I should have remembered, but I don't.
Kosharmas?
Kosharmas, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Because they thought Kosharmas was the name of the planet, but it's actually the name of the guy guarding the gateway.
Yeah. So they
Maybe
find out
he's a planet taking the form of a person. Like seriously considering it.
I mean, this episode, this show in general, and this episode in particular, threw some pretty wild plot twists at you. So,
True.
I'm not ruling anything out. But they find out that this guy has been guarding the boundary or whatever it's called for ages, and has decided not to go through himself just in case anyone comes by. Which they did. They finally did. It was all finally not for nothing.
Yeah, because he sent through all the other humans, and he's like, well, I hope they survived.
Right.
So the doctor and them are like, so let us see the gateway, and we go over to the gateway. Meanwhile, Graham and the gang are not having a good time because, Ashad has boarded their ship and is making his way to the bridge, and they're like running out of time, and they're like, we're gonna die. We're probably gonna die.
Right. We also, I think we skipped a scene where Ashad kind of explains his backstory. It was earlier in the episode, but he actually tells the doctor that he was ready and willing to be cyberized, but was actually denied.
Yeah, but then he ended up getting cyberized anyway because he thinks he's like the one to bring about the
cyber revolution type thing.
Yeah, the Ascension, the titular Ascension.
Right, which is the death of all organic life, is what he says. He says he's the perfect vessel to go beyond.
Mm-hmm.
That's the exact sort of line he drops.
Yeah. And he says that Cyberium chose him for this purpose, which... Not really. I mean, you were just the only candidate around who wasn't the doctor.
Yeah, and I don't know how I feel, honestly, with this episode, having Ashad not really be the main thing or the main villain like the last episode was leading up to. Kind of pulled the wool over their eyes when you stop and... pulled the wool over our eyes when you stop and think about it. Because Haunting of Villa Diodati really hyped up Ashad to sort of be the the guy, the big bad guy in the next episode, and he is to an extent, but there's a lot more going on in this story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because the real main villain shows up right now. The gateway opens. We see Gallifrey on the other side, and the Doctor's like, "That's not possible. It's not possible." And then who should jump through but Barusa? Oh god, we all went for 3 completely different references.
It's just the master pushing like the stone turned to stone Barusa through the portal.
No, it's the master.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, what an entrance. And he's like, get ready, Doctor. But he's really saying this to the audience. You know, it's kind of obvious he's about to say this to the audience because everything's about to change.
Because he knows there's a universe where Doctor Who is a TV show.
Man, that would have been such a bravo Chris Chibnall moment.
Yeah, so like every 2 seasons in recent memory, there's been a 2-parter involving the Cybermen and a different master, which is kind of weird. But how do you guys feel about how Gallifrey has been handled in the Chibnall era so far? Like, does it change your enjoyment of the Day of the Doctor?
No.
No, yeah.
I think it adds to it because the Doctor's... Because we see in the Doctor Falls where the Doctor's like, this doesn't always work, and most of the time it doesn't. And, you know, I'm not doing this to win. I'm doing this because maybe a few people will survive for just a little bit longer. And that's kind of what happens with Day of the Doctor now, is that all those people survive for just a little bit longer. That's like the most true to the Doctor thing about that episode now, is that he saves Gallifrey, not forever, but just for a little bit longer. And that's what matters in the end, is that they survive for at least a little bit longer.
Yeah, I never really looked at it that way. I guess I had mixed feelings because, you know, it feels like after bringing back Gallifrey, Moffat didn't really know what to do with it. Like, he didn't do much with it. And, like, doing the destruction of Gallifrey thing again, it feels like this tug of war between showrunners. Like, this is what should happen. No, this is what should happen. And it's really weird. And it's also weird because, like, the curator, like, apparently future version of the Doctor, says that he has to find Gallifrey, and it's like, oh, I guess the curator knows that Gallifrey won't be saved forever and is just hiding it.
Yeah, I mean, like, why not? The Doctor lies all the time. That's one of the things, one of my notes is like, so, like, Jack Harkness knows everything that happens in this episode, right? Like, Jack Harkness clearly knows about this whole Timeless Child nonsense and about how the fact that Gallifrey is destroyed at this point again, because his warning is like, don't give the lone Cyberman what it wants, so the Cyber Empire will rise again. So clearly he knows, like, most of the events of this story in that aspect. So you have to wonder, like, how much does he know? And it's the same thing with the curator. Like, how much does he know? And does it matter? No. You know, in the end of the day, like, does it matter? Probably not. I think Gallifrey being destroyed is the best thing Russell T did for the show, because Gallifrey is just really boring. There's like every time we went to Gallifrey, it was just, those are some of the most boring stories, except for Deadly Assassin, where it's like they make it a political thriller where where the master is trying to assassinate the president, which is like...
Invasion of Time was interesting, I think.
Yeah, but that's because it had the Sontarans, and we like didn't know anything about the Sontarans at that point.
Maybe.
Like, think about it. Invasion of Time could have taken place on any other planet. Like, it didn't have to be Gallifrey. I mean, the same thing about the Deadly Assassin, which, like, it kind of plays into the fact that Gallifrey is boring. Like, that the best Gallifrey stories could take place on any planet that's not Gallifrey, and it wouldn't matter.
I don't know about that. Maybe I'd have to rewatch the episodes, but I don't know. I don't know if I would say they could take place on any planet.
I don't know. I kind of feel like it would have been an interesting challenge for a showrunner to add more flavor to Gallifrey and make it more interesting than, like, the quote boring unquote perception we have of it based on, like, various stories.
Well, in a way, I actually think that you know, Russell T Davies and Chibnall sort of handle it right. In the Russell T era, now this era, there's a lot of mystery surrounding Gallifrey, and perhaps that's just with the sort of soft reboot that both of those eras have done or did. But maybe I don't know.
I mean,
it's not a fully formed thought. It's just an idea, perhaps.
Well, I'm going to pick up your thought and run with it because I think that you're right. I think they do handle Gallifrey the right way because I think in the classic show, before we see Gallifrey, it's built up with a lot of mystery. In the Third Doctor's era, he talks very mysteriously about his homeworld. Susan talks very mysteriously about Gallifrey, and part of the reason maybe why it's seen as boring is because when we get Gallifrey, it just looks like every other planet. There's nothing defining about it, which is like a budgetary constraint on the part of the BBC, but like that's underwhelming. So I think Russell T and Chris Chibnall bring back the mystery by destroying it, and so we don't know anything about Gallifrey anymore. We don't see the daily lives of Gallifrey. We don't see Barusa just walking down the corridor like, "What up, Doc? Like, been 20 years since I've seen you," and the Doctor's like, "Haha, 20 years on what planet?" Like, we don't get that.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I think it's not just how it looks, but I think it's how it's like actually written as well. Like when we actually go there in the Deadly Assassin, like the Panopticon is pretty interesting. The Matrix is really interesting, but beyond that, like it's just a bunch of dudes in robes.
Yeah, like this. I think this story makes Gallifrey interesting because it reinforces and adds to the idea that the Time Lords are very pompous. Unrightfully so, because they stole their ability to regenerate from this kid that they found, because that was one of the most interesting parts about Gallifrey in the classic show, was that the Doctor was a renegade because he was breaking from their non-interference policy, and they all thought they were better than everyone in the universe, but the Doctor's different because he wants to help people. And I think this story actually brings that back, because I think we lost that a lot in the Moffat era, and partially the Russell T era, but in the Moffat era, when we get Gallifrey brought back, we lose a lot of that because Gallifrey exists now, and we never hear of it again, though. We don't hear that they're not interfering, whereas now that it's gone again, they're not interfering. But we also hear all this backstory where they're like, they stole everything from people, and they're like completely fake, and they're faking it, and they're like not even like Time Lords. Is just a pompous name they chose to make themselves sound important. Their real name is like dumb, like it's the Shobogans. Like, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, like I never actually I didn't think of that when I watched the episode last night, but like, yeah, when that's actually totally what's going on here is like the Shobogans is like it's such a dumb, stupid name, and they gave themselves like
It sounds like a
title. Restaurant
name. Welcome to Shobogans. Can we take your order?
Yeah.
I'm fine with it because Gallifrey will be back like again at some point. Like I almost feel like this is building to because Chris Chibnall's been bringing in a lot of like ancient classic references with the Master and Gallifrey in particular, and like in this scene when we see the Doctor's memory and it's like everything. I almost feel like this is building to like Rassilon or Omega coming back and reforming Time Lord society to be completely different than what we've seen before. Because when Moffat brought back the Time Lords, he brought them back exactly like they were in the classic show. And that's not interesting because we've seen that already. So it feels almost like the reason for destroying Gallifrey again is to completely rewrite it, to bring back something completely different, like maybe a more active Time Lord base that are more. I just used the word active, but more active in interfering with things. Like maybe that's where this is going. So,
well, there is a line in the Timeless Children that does make me wonder whether they might bring back Gallifrey somehow someday, but I guess I'll talk about it when we get to the specific scene that's in.
Yeah, because so the episode, what was it, Ascension of the Cybermen, actually ends with a very odd scene. Well, it ends with the Master, of course, but it ends with Brendan sort of being taken into a room and strapped to a chair, essentially, and his who he thought was his father and the police chief and stuff, are sort of there ominously. They do something to him. We don't know what yet, but yeah, I thought it was creepy. So.
Yeah, they basically
Worked.
it seems like they're electrocuting him, but I guess in Timeless Children we found out they were erasing his mind.
Right, but the weird part about this though is that Brendan is actually an old man at this point. He's retiring because he was a cop. We didn't mention that. But his adopted father and the guy who initially gave him his job are the same age.
I mean, more proof that this is just like a fabricated story.
Right.
Doctored, you might say.
Well, on the topic of bringing back classic things, we open up episode 2, and guess what's back? It's T-Mat, boys. T-Mat's back. Because there's a T-Mat system on the Cybermen spaceship, and the gang is like, well, we got to get there, but we got to go through all the Cybermen first. So Graham comes up with this, in hindsight, this is kind of insane plan. But it works, is to like steal the Cybermen suits and disguise themselves as Cybermen to get to the T-Mat system to beam down to the planet.
Throwback to the Daleks.
Oh yeah. Throw back to the Space Museum when the Doctor gets into that Dalek and goes hee 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 and it just laughs.
Oh god. Now that's a deep cut.
Throwback to the Wizard of Oz when they dress up as the guards.
Oh boy. And yeah, that's actually, I actually really like that about this era of Doctor Who, though, is that it's reaching back into, like, the depths of the classic show that have not been probed in like 40 years or more, and is just reaching far in and pulling just seemingly random stuff out.
But it's not random. That's the brilliance of it. I seriously do think that Chibnall's destroying Gallifrey again so that he can completely rewrite it to be completely different, because he's going even further than Russell T did, because Russell T left the Citadel intact. Whenever we saw Gallifrey, the Citadel was still there, but Chibnall goes as far as to have the Cyberman ship just crush the Citadel and destroy it completely.
Right. One thing I will mention now, and this is probably more appropriate to mention later, but I know I'm going to forget if I don't mention it now, is that one thing that I think this era is retaining from the Moffat era is the whole, like, Time Lords are similar to humans thing. Because, the Moffat era basically did everything but come out and say, like, yeah, the Time Lords are humans. Like, they're not similar. They're not, there aren't just, like, parallels. They're, like, they actually are just, like, humans way in the future. This era, I think, doesn't do that, but it does give us this thing of, like, the Time Lords were actually originally the Shobogans, and they developed rudimentary space travel, kind of like, human beings, and they were way in over their heads, but they traveled and started experimenting with things that, like, nobody could really anticipate or understand, and it's like, all right, sounds a lot like, the human race.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are a lot of similarities. I thought that the Timeless Child was going to be like, it was going to be a closed time loop where the child was like the Doctor in the future, and she fell through the gateway as a child and then becomes the Doctor, and then at the end of her life turns into a child and goes back in time through like, I thought that would be interesting, but anyway.
That would be interesting. That would be really interesting, but
we don't know that part of the story yet, so we can't say that it's not true.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so Graham and the gang's plan works, actually. They make it down to the planet. I'd like to mention the Mutton Chop Men. I think Jim pointed out on Twitter that they look like they had mutton chops, and I could never unsee that again, so thanks, Jim. But they've also got wicked cool spiky shoulder pads. I don't know if you noticed this, but just thought that was funny.
That, actually, but so right before that, actually, Graham and Yaz have a little heart to heart. Yeah, still fulfilling her designated
back.
role of like sitting down and just talking to someone every week. And this was actually you know, kind of emotional. Graham is like, Yaz, the doctor's great and all, but I think you're the greatest person like ever, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and Yaz says you're not such a bad human, and he's like upset that he didn't get more than just that sentence.
And she's like, mate, I'm from Yorkshire. That's practically a love letter. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, so, okay, this line was actually really interesting to me because early this season, maybe this was just in everyone's heads, but I remember people, and myself even, thinking that, like, there was going to be something, going on with Yaz, or that Yaz was kind of suspicious at the beginning of the season or whatever, or that she had perhaps teamed up with the Master or something. And this line, like, you're not such a bad human yourself, I was like, wait, like, is Yaz even human? Like, because, you wouldn't say, like, you're not such a bad, you would say, like, you're not such a bad person, right? Or, like, you're not so bad yourself, but, like, specifically noting that he's human is like,
It's Chameleon. Surprise!
That is a surprise.
God, the real Yaz is actually just, like, at home. It's been Chameleon the entire time. Or ever since Spyfall, it's been Chameleon.
Bravo, Chris. Bravo.
Wow.
I mean,
that's when they go down to the planet. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, you can literally basically never disprove that any of the characters was Chameleon, because Chameleon can just like turn into them with no discernible like differences. So
yeah, maybe they're all Chameleon. Maybe Chameleon like wasn't actually destroyed, and way far in the future, like the end of time as we know it, finds a way to time travel, and there's just every character.
We are all Sam Beckett.
This show is just Chameleon acting out his fantasies.
Chameleon playing God with the universe.
Doctor Who fan fictions.
I mean, hey, there are weirder fan fictions out there, like the one I found with Nardole and the Doctor, which I think Dylan knows what I'm referring to, but yeah, I'm not even going to mention what that one's about.
Speaking of Nardole, the actor who played him was in this sitcom called Community a few years prior. And it was an episode where they go to an Inspector Space-Time convention, which is essentially Doctor Who in that universe. And to take it a step further, in that BuzzFeed article with, like, what if Doctor Who was American? Donald Glover is the 11th Doctor on that list.
I can see it. My boy DG.
I like to think the American 13th Doctor's run would essentially be The Good Place.
Yeah, I don't know too much about The Good Place. Other than that, it's like a post-life sitcom-ish thing.
Ted Danson as Graham.
Wow.
So I think we, if I'm not mistaken, we get to a part where the Master says he doesn't have a better nature, which the Doctor's trying to appeal to. And how do you guys think this fits with, like, the whole Missy situation?
I'm starting to believe that this is a pre-Missy incarnation. Sorry, go ahead, Kian.
I was just going to say that's a good question, because I haven't really tried to connect the dots there at all.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, like, it would be a real twist if this was actually not the Master, but maybe someone who's been given the Master's memories, kind of like the next Doctor sort of thing. Who knows?
Well, he's got a TARDIS, so he'd have to steal a TARDIS as well.
Right.
Maybe it's the Ronnie still holding on to this.
Bring back the Ronnie.
Still holding on to this, the Ronnie pretending to be the Master theory.
bring back the celestial toy maker. You can't just name drop him and do you hear me and not use him.
Well, they did. They name dropped the Black and White Guardians too.
The 12th Doctor one-shot comic was not enough.
Neither was the Nightmare Fair, which we listened to. Throwback.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't enough.
Yeah, I've listened to that too.
No, I'm starting to believe this might be a pre-Missy incarnation, but I'm fine if it's a post-Missy incarnation, because that line kind of plays into jumping ahead a little bit when we get the Ruth Doctor Zero.
You mean Zero?
I mean Zero talking to 13. Okay, Zero. Fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Zero talking to 13 and is like, when have you ever been defined by the incarnations that came before you? And she's like, that's a good point. And that's basically that line from the Master is kind of his version of that, where it's like, he's not defined by the previous incarnations of him. We kind of got that in Dr. Falls where John Sims' Master was like, there's no way you could be me. And she's like, I am. I'm a completely different person to you. And that's how regeneration works, you fool. She doesn't say that, but that's kind of what I got. Yeah, exactly. Master's just going through his New Year's resolution.
Resolution. Quite the callback.
I'm just trying to see how many stories I can name drop at this point. Waiting for a way to weave.
Patrol.
Waiting for a way to weave Meglos in there.
You just did.
Just wait till the end of this Timeless Children recap. I've got a callback for y'all.
Oh no.
Oh boy. Well, okay, so the Master starts explaining the hidden sort of story of the Time Lords, what Time Lord Society tried to keep hidden from everyone, and what's sort of been hidden in the Matrix this entire time.
Yeah, I kind of wrote here that if it's just in the Matrix, then it wasn't really that hidden, It's just...
Maybe they locked it behind, special access privileges or something. I don't know. I don't know how the Matrix works in Doctor Who. Apparently you can just run into it and from a doorway, as we learned in The Ultimate Foe.
Oh, geez, that's a deep cut. Whoa.
This truly is a trial of a Time Lord.
Well, so anyway, the Master decides to enlighten the Doctor as to her past history. And basically explains the story of the Timeless Child, which we've basically actually already explained in explaining how Graham was an analog, but the Timeless Child was a child found by...
Brendan?
Yes, Brendan.
Oh god, if it was Graham, oh my god.
Well, you never know. Sorry, my bad, Brendan.
There's actually this Reddit theory that I saw that involves Graham, where it's like Ruth could be a future Doctor if Graham is the 15th Doctor, and since he's with 13 all the time, that's why Ruth, who would be 14, doesn't remember 13. It doesn't really work, but it would have been brilliant if Chris Chibnall had found a way to do that.
Chris, you man. Well, I read a very interesting theory that that this story would have been more interesting if the Master was the Timeless Child, but we'll get there because we haven't, again, explained this whole thing. So the Timeless Child was this child found by this Shibogan explorer named Tecteun. And
if you take a shot every time the Master says Tecteun, that's 14 shots.
Oh god.
Well, my liver can handle it. I hope. So she then experiments on the child because the child falls off a cliff and regenerates, and it's the very first regeneration in this universe. And Tecteun's like, what is that? We got to find out, what's going on. And experiments on her. And I got the implication that she was killing the child every so often to make him or her regenerate so that she could study the process.
Yeah, I think that's
I don't know if that's the subtext you guys picked up on, but that's what I got.
Oh, I didn't think of it as killing, because like I don't view regeneration as death, even though a few incarnations kind of describe it as like dying. Like it seemed to me like she was trying to invoke change upon the child. And I also thought it was weird how like this supposed first regeneration looks super fiery, whereas like it's like before all the classic regenerations where it's like more subtle.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
just a
don't.
visual continuity. It's like the Star Trek Discovery visual reboot problem.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if it was just like a modern visual thing or if it was like, oh, in universe it used to be more fiery until like Tech Tayun got it more under control and then the limit was put on it. Like, they'll probably never explain it, but whatever.
I think it was just a visual thing. Like, in hindsight, I think it's all just a visual thing.
Like, there's this YouTube video called The Fifth Doctor Regenerates, but it's 2010, and it's like the 10th Doctor's regeneration to 11.
I was gonna say, like, it'd be weird to have a problem with the whole regeneration visual difference and not have a problem with the fact that the TARDIS has literally changed size every single time the Doctor has changed and the showrunner has changed and like changed color, and there's no in-universe explanation for that beyond just it's just the visuals. So, like, also the like reappearance and disappearance of the St. John's ambulance logo, like the TARDIS has like visually changed a lot, and they never mention it. And at this point, I just accept it as just like different visual representations of the same thing.
Right. Well, I mean, the TARDIS is designed to change, so maybe it has like these slight changes on the outside. That's what I've always thought. It just can't get past that police box form.
Goddamn junkyard.
Damn you, I am Foreman.
So, do you think Tech Yoon ever tried going through the gateway that the Timeless Child was in front of?
I don't think so.
If she did, that wasn't part of the master's story. At least that's not what I got.
Right.
Or you might say the Timeless Child is an unearthly child. Whoa, I just thought of that one.
Oh
Whoa. Whoa.
no! Oh boy!
That would mean an unearthly child could now refer to either the Doctor or Susan. Whoa!
Whoa!
Chibnall, you madman.
Mind blown.
But okay, so the whole thing is that like all the Time Lords have the Doctor's DNA to some extent inside them, but like Susan really does, right? Because she actually is like
Yes.
kin of the Doctor. So,
Yes. But again, that's what I was saying. Like, maybe some Time Lords develop the ability naturally through the time vortex, which would make this entire premise by the Master, like, invalid. Which is just classic Master, really, just completely jumping to conclusions and never thinking things through, you know?
maybe. Yeah, I mean, we still don't know. That's the thing. Is like this episode just leaves us with like, yeah, shrug. Like
The episode
figure it
does
out.
introduce the Deus Ex Machina they're going to use to get out of this. 10 minutes into Timeless Children, where Ashad goes, I have a death particle in me.
Oh, yeah.
The death particle can kill all organic life on a planet. And the Master goes, interesting.
Yeah, this seemed a little random. I mean, I think perhaps if they had brought this thing up in Haunting of Villa Diodati, like, yeah, they're all after this like death particle, and we can't let Shad get his hands on it, type thing. Maybe it would have
Yeah, maybe
landed a little better.
maybe the threat Ashad makes in Villa Diodati is not that he's bringing his ship down to blow up the planet, but that he's going to use the death particle inside of him to wipe out the life on the planet.
Yeah, because it does feel a little out of left field. I don't really care at the end of the day. It's fine. But it just kind of feels out of nowhere.
The death particle ruined all of Doctor Who.
Yep. Pack it up. We're done here.
It's kind of nice that they just don't explain how the death particle works, though. They're just like, this is the death particle. It kills things. That's why it's called the death particle. And that's it. It's the death particle. Instead of being like, it accesses the quantum ability of every DNA like, it's the death particle.
Yeah, they don't go into it really at all.
It's the death particle.
Yeah, I thought that the cutting between the Matrix stuff and the other stuff that was happening felt kind of off. Like, even the second time around, I thought maybe the whole Matrix exposition should have been like one long scene before cutting back to like what's happening with everyone else.
I kind of thought that while I was watching, but then I realized that it would feel really boring if we just sat there for 20 minutes and just heard like the master just talk to the doctor for 20 straight minutes. Like it would get really boring.
It's actually not as long as it feels. Trying to see in my notes like how long it was. Like I think it might have been like less than 10 minutes altogether. Like
Yeah,
just the scenes within the Matrix itself.
I feel like it would have felt even longer if we had seen it all at once though. And also like seeing it all at once would have messed with the continuity of the episode because the monster is like I can be in two places at once.
Also, there are sort of little mini cliffhangers in the story. I mean, I remember, cutting back to the companions, and I'm like, okay, like this is cool, but like, yeah, get back to the master story. Like, I want to know what happens, which is good. Kept me invested. I think at least.
Get me invested.
Yeah,
And
I mean, the first time I did wanted to keep cutting back to the master stuff just because I knew revelations were coming, and I was like, okay, just get to it already.
well, it reminded me of watching Lord of the Rings. However long ago we watched it for Triple Play, where they were cutting back between the battle at the end and Frodo and Sam trying to throw the ring into the volcano. And every time it would cut to the battle, I'd be like, okay, like just get back to Frodo and Sam and Gollum. Like I don't care about this. Like just get back to them. Which in a way made the scenes that like I was actually interested in seeing even that much better.
Mm-hmm.
So this just felt a little similar. Because while this is all going on, they're all just like destroying Cybermen and such.
You're Ryan and
Graham
the gang are
Ryan
fighting
and
off the
Yaz.
Cybermen.
Right.
And they eventually make it through the gateway, although I think I kind of missed a few minutes here because I don't know how.
No, I mean, they just fight off Cybermen, and I think they just eventually go through, and Yaz goes like, whoa, like, this is Gallifrey.
It's a bombed out wasteland. Wow. Wow.
Which this line actually made me think maybe I'm just picking up on things that aren't there because of this wild theory I have that Yaz somehow knows more than she's letting on, but like Graham and Ryan don't seem to understand where they are, even though they know about Gallifrey, kind of. But Yaz is the one who goes like, "Guys, this is Gallifrey. Like, this is where the Doctor's from."
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps that's just Yaz being more perceptive. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, but it makes you think. Makes you think. Maybe it just makes me think.
No, I think that's a good point. That Yaz is the only one who really comprehends the gravity of the situation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they all make it back to the Doctor. The Doctor, meanwhile, has like really taken this. She's taking this story badly. She actually like physically attacks the Master when she learns that she's the Timeless Child.
She mostly attacks him because he refuses to tell the rest of the story, and she's like, "Okay, she has a very interesting line here that you got to know I'm going to talk about," because she goes, "I have a right to know my own life." And I was like, very interesting, given how you just wiped memories like left and right this season. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I also kind of wondered whether this is kind of going back a bit, but whether the child that the Timeless Child played with before falling off the cliff would have been revealed to be the Master, like the very first incarnation or something. But that's never revealed, so I guess that's not the case.
We do know from the audio master that they played together as children, and one of them killed a bully. named Torvald.
But that was like retconned for the show or something? Wasn't
Was
or
it?
I don't know. I don't know.
That
I honestly
story
don't know.
is very interesting because it never really places a timeline on when it could have happened, and is also very interesting because a lot of it is questionable, and you don't know if any of it is true because it's the Doctor telling. The story is framed in the Doctor telling a story to someone, so you don't know how much of it is true or not.
I guess I guess I always thought that conflicted with the drumbeat thing, but I guess it doesn't when you think about it.
Well, I mean, in the Timeless Children, the Master mentions how he and the Doctor used to skip classes and hide from Barusa, and I imagine that's like when they were kids or something.
Or when they were at Time Lord Academy.
True, also possible.
Well, I always, or not always, but after having watched this episode, I sort of thought that, and I don't know why I thought this, so maybe it's wrong, but that the Doctor's current regeneration cycle was the one that like met the Master, as a child type thing. But maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
Well, there is the implication that she started over like on this string when we see the kid in the barn with Clara. Never forget.
Yeah, no, that's very. Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, it's very clear that like William Hartnell's Doctor thought he was the first like Doctor of like that life.
Yeah, see, it's interesting because he thought he was the first one, but then we get to the second Doctor, and Stephen Moffat actually brought up a good point. He's like, when you get to that regeneration, the second Doctor acts like he's done this before, like this is not a surprise to him. Like he's been through this before. And apparently there's like a short story that elaborates on this idea from a long time ago where the second Doctor like opens, or Ben and Polly open like a trunk of stuff in the TARDIS. And there's like stuff in there that belonged to the Doctor that like doesn't make sense with the first Doctor, like a razor blade and stuff. And it's like implied that it belonged to a previous incarnation that like had a beard. So very interesting. And then of course the brain of Morbius, which how can we go this whole episode with not mentioning the brain of Morbius?
Well, I thought we were like waiting until a bit later for that, but yeah. And the Master does mention in the story that Tecteun restricted the limit to 12. So, like when the Doctor became William Hartnell's Doctor, do you think the limit was placed on them then as well? Like, does time of the Doctor even matter?
Yeah, that's the thing is like this story makes you even question that because if the Doctor just straight up is the timeless child, then she perhaps doesn't have this artificial limit at all.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if he's had a limit placed on him when he was the 11th Doctor and got the regenerations from the High Council. Like, we don't know if that was if when they gave him we don't know if when they gave him those regenerations they gave him a cycle of 12 or unlimited regenerations. And even in the Moffat era, the 12th Doctor at some point says this in, I think, the 3-parter with The Lie of the Land and all that. Maybe it was at another time, but he basically says, like, you can just keep shooting me. I don't know how long I'm going to go regenerating. Like, I've got genuinely no idea.
Yeah, and I mean, the division... okay, I think we see, like, 7 incarnations of the Timeless Child before we get that scene with like the meeting with someone from this organization called the Division, and then that's when the memory cuts out. And I'm guessing the Morbius Doctors take place between that and Hartnell, and supposedly Ruth is somewhere in that gap as well. So it kind of feels like they're trying not to write themselves into a corner and just letting Big Finish and whatever go nuts.
I mean, they could always buy into that theory I saw one time, which I'm coming more and more around to, which is that the Watcher in Logopolis was the Time Lords granting the Doctor a new regeneration cycle, and the Doctor's actually out of regenerations in Logopolis, and the Watcher is his new cycle. So that would provide leeway for all the Morbius Doctors to be part of the same cycle that the first through fourth Doctors are in, because that would make it 12. And then you could just insert Doctors at will, like between 4 and 11 to make it work. Like,
could be.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll quite explain that, but it's clear that at this point it's pointless to rank all the Doctors since there are so many.
It's always been pointless once you pass like 5.
Oh, see, I still ranked them like before this episode, but now it's like, why bother?
Yeah, it's difficult too.
So, yeah, the Tecteun steals regeneration, gives it to all the Time Lords. There's the Division, which Steven already mentioned. So, yeah, we got most of the story, and then we see the scene with Brendan getting his mind wiped, and that's when the Doctor kind of pans around and sees on the back of the clock there's a plaque that says, "For services rendered to the Division." So, presumably, this is her reward for being part of the Division, her getting her mind wiped.
Yeah, kind of like how when Donna got her mind wiped, that was, a reward. She didn't have to live with knowledge of, like, alien stuff. Right? Right? Reminder that Donna got mind wiped while Rose got away with everything.
Yeah, reminder that Donna got mind wiped and Rose got her own, like, Doctor to play with. Shall we say, and her entire
own, like,
universe, her own TARDIS, if you believe
Yeah.
that cut scene is canon, like...
She got her own universe that's, like, totally perfect for her.
Yeah, Russell T's companions get more and more shafted as they go on, because Rose got everything, Martha got nothing, and then Donna got her mind wiped and left with less than she started with.
So Russell T is Rose, right? And Rose loves the Doctor, but not Mickey. So is this Russell T saying he loves Doctor Who more than Disney?
Probably. I mean, Rose is for sure 100% a Russell T insert.
Yeah.
Just like how Amy is 100% a Stephen Moffat self-insert, or maybe Clark, both of them to an extent.
Both of them.
Who's the Chris Chibnall insert?
That's the thing. I don't think there
has been one yet.
That's honestly, that's why I kind of feel I haven't like verbalized this at all, and perhaps I shouldn't, but I honestly feel like this era of the show has a little more integrity than the other ones, kind of because of that. And yeah, I think that's a I'm making that statement perhaps too soon or too bluntly, but said it, so here you go.
It's certainly a very controversial statement, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that there's no Osgood type character that feels too meta.
For sure. And I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again here. One of the reasons why I think this is both the best era of new Doctor Who and perhaps the best era of Doctor Who ever is that the companions are like way more down to earth. They're just like they're just normal. They're not like the girl who waited or the Rose was bad, the bad wolf type thing. They're just normal people.
Yeah, this might actually be my favorite TARDIS team, actually.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think it's mine. I think it is mine. I mean, Tegan Turlow and Nissa is still pretty high up there.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
But yeah, where are we in the episode?
We just got to the end of the Timeless Child explanation.
Are we at the Cyber Masters?
Yeah, the master brings in his new Cyber Masters, his perfect race, the ability to regenerate merged with Cyberman armor.
Cyber armor. Okay, so this was such a masterish plan, because he goes on and on to a shot about how like anyone can just turn themselves into a robot. Like that's a dumb plan. And then he reveals his master plan, which is like cyber armor.
Yeah, I actually like how these look. Like the thing around their heads that looks like what the Time Lords wore. Like, I think it looks cool, actually.
Yeah, it does. It actually does.
It's very cool and very underused.
He also shrank a shot. I don't remember if we mentioned that.
Yeah, with his tissue compression eliminator. That's another like random throwaway classic thing that Chibnall brought back.
Yeah.
And he like regrets not saying somebody needs to cut you down to size before shrinking him. Says he'll save it for next time.
Well, we also didn't mention that he obtains the Cyberium.
Right.
By shrinking a shard.
Right. I really like Dewan's master.
Yeah, me too.
He's one of my favorites.
He's the most terrifying master we've had like in a while. Missy was scary, but Missy was more of a like character study in the master, I think. And John Sim was only really scary in Dr. Falls. He was very manic on the show. Which again I think worked against David Tennant, but I don't think it made him like terrifying in the way that Sacha Dhawan's master is.
Yeah, I think Sacha Dhawan might be my favorite master since Roger Delgado.
Oof, deep cut.
Like, Roger Delgado is still my favorite.
I mean, on this topic where he gains the Cyberium, I was going to say someone on the wiki pointed out that this means that the master here actually fulfills like most of the or all of the hybrid prophecy that Moffat set up in series 9, because the prophecy was that a hybrid would stand over the ruin of Gallifrey's and break 1 billion hearts to heal his own.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, no.
Bravo, Chibnall.
So the Master Cyberium hybrid standing on the ruins of Gallifrey, killing all the Time Lords to heal his own heart after learning about the Timeless Child, you know. Very interesting.
The biggest thing about the Timeless Child to me was not actually the Doctor's reaction to it, but the Master's, where he can't accept that a portion of the Doctor, as far as he knows, is in him, i.e. the Doctor's DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And his reaction to that is just to destroy everything, and, you know...
It's interesting to me because it mirrors Spyfall in a way, because the Master is obsessed apparently with the purity of his own bloodline in this episode, right? He's obsessed with the fact that the Doctor is part of him. And in Spyfall, we see that the Master works with the Nazis, a group of people who were infamously obsessed with the purity of the bloodline, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the Doctor like turns that on him in Spyfall, where it's like, you know, when she tells them that he's not, she tells the Nazis that he's not actually white and removes the perception filter. And, you know, we talked about how that scene played out in our episode on it, but it's very interesting, this mirror between Spyfall, where he's working with the Nazis who are obsessed with the purity of their bloodline, and here the Master's like cannot accept that he has the Doctor's DNA in him. Like, he thought he was purebred Time Lord himself and himself only, and his parents. So it's very interesting. Like, maybe providing an explanation as to why he was working with the Nazis in that episode. Because I know in that episode we were like, well, why is he... Like, the Doctor even comments on this, like, this is low even for you to work with the Nazis.
Right. Yeah, that is just sort of an interesting parallel there. But, yeah, the Doctor's still trapped in the,
Stasis
in the Matrix.
Field.
Yeah.
And the episode ends there. Imagine.
Oh, God.
Well, it does almost end in a similar way of, like, not plot-wise, but, like, in a way of, like, all right, like, can't believe we have to wait months now to find out what happens.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We get there when we get there.
The Doctor's wandering around inside her own mind, and she happens upon the fugitive Doctor.
Zero.
Yep, Zero.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say about this. So we've been wondering like where exactly this doctor fits, and weirdly enough, if you Google Joe Martin, like nobody knows when her birthday is.
Oh, what?
So yeah,
Oh, wow.
like her Wikipedia page doesn't show when she was born. But
Oh my
Hmm.
god.
but yeah, I think it's like after like rewatching, I think the implication is pretty clear that she's pre Hartnell. But I did kind of like that season 6B theory that like maybe she was between 2 and 3, and it reminded me of something I read on the wiki. How there's like in 2003 there are these Doctor Who Unbound audios that were like what ifs set in parallel universes. And in one of them, it's like, what if the second Doctor escaped and regenerated into a woman and hid on planet Earth from the Time Lords? And like in that one, the Doctor is voiced by someone named Arabella Weir, and
Hmm.
they even bring in the scarecrows from like the second Doctor comic strip where like
Jeez.
apparently he regenerates. But yeah, like apparently this audio was called Exile, and it was pretty controversial because I I don't know if this is what actually says in the audio or if this is how the wiki is interpreting it, but how like the second Doctor committing suicide causes him to change gender, and it's like that wouldn't age well.
Mm.
And weirdly enough, there was one before that where a different Doctor Who Unbound audio where the Doctor is voiced by Derek Jacobi, and in that one, I guess there's also like a Doctor Who TV show, and Derek Jacobi's the guy who played the pre-Johnson Master.
Right.
Hmm.
But according to the wiki, he commits suicide at the end of that one. So, yikes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's like, what if the exile female Doctor regenerated into Ruth? But it's also like very problematic, so like it'd be hard to fit that in.
Uh,
I don't know. Does it matter? I guess is my question because Ruth's immediate line to the doctor's like, Ruth is Zero is like, why does this matter? And the doctor's like, it means I'm not who I thought I was. And Zero just responds with, when has it ever mattered what your previous incarnations did to who you are? And I still think that's like the most important line in this whole story because it's basically just saying like none of this matters in the end of the day. Like none of this changes who the Doctor is. None of this changes the core fundamental premise of the show that the Doctor's traveling through time helping people out. Because at the end of the day, the Doctor, every incarnation is different, and it's never dependent on who came before them. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, it feels very Star Wars sequel trilogy in that sense.
definitely. Do you guys think this has anything to do with the like post-human stuff from earlier on in this season? Because Dylan and I were kind of talking about that in some of the earlier episodes this season, and maybe this has something to do with like you weren't defined by your current limits type thing. I don't know. I don't really have too much of an idea about it beyond just that, but maybe.
I think so. It also kind of ties in with the 11th Doctor's final speech, where he's like, when you think about it, we all change through our whole lives. And as long as you remember who you were, which is like the opposite of what happens here, but he's like, as long as you remember the mistakes you've made, you can always be better.
Yeah, on the rewatch, there was a line from Ruth that stuck out to me where she mentions to the 13th Doctor. Let me see if I can find the actual line. So the Doctor, the 13th Doctor says, I don't know how to stop the Master. And then Ruth says, of course you do. That one question that's nagging at you. The one thing he said that you didn't understand. And then the doctor says the one thing who said, the master? And Ruth says no, and then says something else, finishes talking. And like on the rewatch, I was like, who is the he that she's mentioning here?
It's Ashad.
Is it though? Because like I couldn't remember what question Ashad asked in the.
I don't think Ruth said it was a question. I think Ruth just said it was the thing that he said that she didn't understand, because the doctor says, "Oh, that's right." When she figures out that Ashad had mentioned the death inside of him, the doctor was like, "I didn't understand that." 'Cause she didn't hear the whole conversation with the death particle. She only heard that line, and that's why she didn't understand it. She says, "Oh, that's what Ruth's doctor meant, was when she said she was referring to Ashad, because I didn't understand what Ashad was saying," and that's how the doctor figures out that there's a death particle inside of Ashad.
Okay, I see now. Yeah, I guess I misinterpreted the second time around and thought there was something deeper to it that was like hidden from us, but
I mean, it's possible the doctor is just misinterpreting what the doctor said.
That's the most Doctor Who line you're ever gonna get. That's the most Doctor Who concept you're ever gonna get to. That's almost the perfect like cap to this 6-year experience we've had of watching Doctor Who, is that one sentence. Like honestly, it was all just leading up to that. So thank you, Dylan.
Great, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So then the doctor proves that Doctor Who is better than the Matrix by thinking of the Doctor Who theme song. You could have thrown in Doctor in Distress here, just saying. But
oh, jeez.
Bravo,
Chibnall. Bravo, Segun Akinola.
Just throw in like Doctor in the TARDIS.
And like this also made me think of like, it feels like an analog for like entitled Doctor Who fans being like, I've experienced more Doctor Who than you have. I have more knowledge than you do. And just alienating the lesser experienced fans.
But in a way, honestly, you don't even have to watch Doctor Who. You can just watch this scene and get caught up.
Yeah, it'll just all be beamed into your mind.
Exactly. See, we've already watched everything, so that's why we didn't get that experience. So we didn't.
Great. We should have to wipe our minds.
What if there are like 30 free Hartnell seasons of Doctor Who that actually aired, and then the BBC erased them because they wanted a clean slate with the first Doctor? And what if you guys have done podcast episodes on those?
The BBC Armed Forces showed up at our house.
You've been podcasting longer than you realized.
Oh no, it already feels like it's been 20 years. It's been 60 years.
It's been 84 years. Yeah, people don't know, but BBC actually stands for British Black Archive. The C is the C from archive. No, okay, I thought that was funny. Screw you guys, I thought it was funny.
I mean, is that a reference to something?
No, okay, no. Because the
Black Archive.
The Black Archive wipes people's minds in like the most sinister fashion possible.
That's still the like most twisted thing Doctor Who's introduced and just brushed aside. Is that they just wipe this man's memory every single day and play it off as a joke.
Yeah. So the Doctor breaks out.
Yeah. Overwhelming the Matrix. There's a list on the wiki about everything that she remembers here, and like I said, it includes Syl, so Syl is in there apparently. My man.
Should have included Peter Cushing's Doctor, just saying.
Wouldn't that be a twist, just to have Peter Cushing show up?
Peter Cushing once said that he likes to imagine that, like, his Doctor was a later incarnation captured by someone like the celestial toy maker got his mind wiped, made him relive past adventures.
Oh no.
Doing Chris Chibnall.
Oh no.
Well, this could have been the perfect opportunity to insert some Doctor Who podcasts into the Doctor Who canon. You know, just have some Doctor Who podcast logos flash on screen as all.
Yeah,
this
I would have
happening.
provided a high definition version of the Trust Your Doctor logo if they had asked.
BBC had requested.
Yeah, if Chris Chibi had emailed me and been like, "Hey, can I have just a high resolution copy?" I'd be like, "Yo, I got you. Here's a 28 by 2800 version."
But they didn't, so their loss, really.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe in protest, we should just end the podcast.
That'll show them.
Yeah, that'll show them.
But if you end the podcast, you'll die.
True enough. We've condemned ourselves to this.
Or you guys will regenerate into Jim and Martin, go back in time to the Crinoid podcasts. Eventually, you come to find out that every Doctor Who podcast is just you guys regenerated each time. The Blue Box podcast, 250th episode. It's just a showcase of all your podcasts.
I mean, it is Trust Your Doctor canon that Jim and Martin are just regenerated versions of us.
Yeah.
5 Doctors episode.
I forgot that time we tried to act.
It worked out great.
Anyway, the Doctor decides that she has to sacrifice herself.
Yes.
And get her companions back to Earth.
She decides to use the death particle to blow up the Cyber Masters, but there's only one grenade left and it's hand detonation only.
Right.
So she
tells them, she gets them all to leave, or so she thinks.
She shoves them in a TARDIS and sets it for Earth, and she's like, "You guys just live on Earth." And she says, like, "You guys live a good life." And leaves.
Right. But surprise, what's his face actually stayed behind. Something he's
Kosharman.
Yeah. He's sort of become an expert at staying behind when everyone else leaves, so no surprises
here.
here.
Waited.
Well, okay, so he stays behind. And he takes, because the Master's telling the Doctor to use the death particle and to kill everyone, and she can't do it, obviously, because it's the Doctor, and she wouldn't just do that. But Kosharmas comes in, and he's like, "I'll do it," and she's like, "No," and he's like, It's my burden.
Yes.
I was the one who sent the Siberian back in time, and clearly I didn't send it back far enough because, Ashad found it. But then we get a scene with Yaz, Graham, and Ryan, and what's her name, and they're like, "What are we going to do now? Like, I wonder if the Doctor's okay." Somehow they just, like, this entire journey home, they just, like, didn't notice that Kosharmas is, like, gone. I guess he meant that little to them, but none of them are like, "Wait a minute, where's Kosharmas?"
Maybe the side characters are that forgettable.
Yeah, I mean, we've clearly seen that Yaz just doesn't give a damn how she just kind of ruined what's her name's psyche in Can You Hear Me? Like, yeah, this is another planet and you've been traveling through space this entire time. Like, you'll get used to it.
Yeah, but then the Doctor runs away, or Kosharmas wipes everything, and the Master's like, "No," and can't wait to not see how the Master gets out of this one again.
Becomes a cyborg.
Oh, jeez.
A true cyber master.
But, okay, so I forget how this is done. Honestly, I forget what the sequence of events is that leads up to this, but the Jadoon actually show up.
Oh, yes. So the Doctor takes the TARDIS and goes back to find her TARDIS.
Yeah.
And then she gets in her TARDIS and she's about to leave. She's like, hello, old friend. And then the Jadoon just teleport in and go, Jadoon, cold unit. Cold case unit. Subject, the fugitive. Sentenced, life in prison. And just beam her into a prison. And that's how it ends.
Shada!
You were waiting to do that, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Nice. A shod is an anagram of Shada. That was a hint right there. This has to be Shada.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
It'll just be the 13th Doctor reliving the exact same events 4 and 8 went through.
I mean, they tried to hide the Master being in this by using the anagram Barak Stamus as an actor in this character, in this story, and that's just an anagram of Master is back.
Yeah, I really hope it's Shada. and I saw that someone like on my feed was upset that Captain Jack Harkness didn't show up in this finale. But I feel like there's too much going on for him to be in it, and I guess part of it was like I knew ahead of time he'd only be in Fugitive of the Jadoon, so I was like, oh, okay, they'll probably bring him back again in Series 13. But maybe he'll be back in this next special.
I think he'll be back in the special.
Yeah, I think, wasn't that leaked like a couple weeks ago that he was going to be coming back? I don't think it's been officially announced, but I think it's all but confirmed.
I mean, he literally has that line in Fugitive of the Jadoon where he's like, I'll be back and I'll see her. I may not be back soon or like right when she needs me, but I will be back to help her.
Right.
And you don't...
It'd be funny if he's not back until after she regenerates, so he doesn't even get to meet the 13th Doctor.
I mean, that would be funny, but I think Chibnall himself will bring Harkness back. Like, he wouldn't put that line in there without having some plan for it.
Right. Could go horribly awry and not end up happening, but, I think it's probably at least planned.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. I think there's way too much going on in this episode to fit anything with Jack in.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since Jack Harkness is such a larger-than-life character that, like, he would perhaps detract from some of the stuff that's going on here.
Yeah, I don't want to jack up the episodes.
Hey!
Wow. Wow.
So there's actually a couple, I don't know if you guys have anything else to say before we launch into like a couple specific topics, but there are a couple things I want to touch on.
I've just got, I think I've touched on most of mine except for one, so...
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention, in the final confrontation between the Master and the Doctor, there are a couple interesting lines. So one, the Doctor literally verbatim quotes Walt Whitman. She says, "I contain multitudes," which is from, Whitman. It's like nice. It's like a hugely famous line that's been taken throughout the years in like tons of different directions, like in terms of, the relationship between individualism and collectivism, or like even ecological stuff. The Doctor says it here, sort of after accepting that she has this background that she never knew about. And then the Master, in one of the very next lines, perhaps says an even more famous line. He goes, "Take on me."
Take on me.
Wow, tonal whiplash from Walt Whitman to aha.
To aha. Well, perhaps, but perhaps not, because both are in like the cultural canon. Both are like going to be passed down for generations.
I seem to also remember reading on the wiki that at the start of Timeless Children, I think it was, either the Master or the Doctor quotes like Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, which is interesting. Just want to throw that in there since we're talking about the cultural history of Earth, I guess.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I don't know if this is connected, but Mary Shelley actually wrote a book after Frankenstein called The Last Man, which is like about like a post-apocalyptic future type thing. I haven't read it, but I just kind of know the sort of the summary of it. And so immediately after The Haunting of Villa Diodati, they go to like this post-apocalyptic world where there's only like 7 people left. So I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've read a little Mary Shelley short story collection, but the premise sounds kind of familiar, but maybe I haven't read it.
Yeah, I'm like 99% sure it's a full novel. Um, but maybe, yeah, I don't know.
I
I
mean,
don't
she
know.
does play with some similar themes, so it's probably something different.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting stuff here, and I'm just super curious to find out where all this goes, because I mean, they answered a lot of questions here that I had, but opened up even more in that process.
Yeah, I think this is very exciting
Definitely.
because there's no idea where it's going to go. Not only because it doesn't exist yet, but also because it's not even possible for us to have watched it yet because we're caught up now. Like, this is a very exciting time, I think, for me anyway.
This is a very exciting time to catch up with Doctor Who. In a way, I'm glad that they released this season early and prevented us from catching up with Series 11,
Mm-hmm.
because this is like a way more exciting cliffhanger than whatever the last one from Series 11 was called. Forget what it was called.
Not resolution. The Battle of Ranskorev
Yeah,
Kolos
exactly. Yeah.
with the Ux. Well, so when I was watching this, I had this kind of idea where it was like, man, I get this feeling that this was Chibnall's idea for what the 13th Doctor's regeneration story was going to be, and he sped it up because people were upset that there wasn't enough of an overarching plot line. Because a lot of this episode to me almost seemed like it would have played out differently, maybe not necessarily better, but differently if this was like the 13th Doctor was died in this episode. Because when she's in the Matrix, she's just like, I'm so tired of this like running around nonsense, and Zero's like, who gives a shit? Like, you've but like the lines about like never being defined by who you are before, to me made it seem like this was going to be like a renewal. And I almost imagine that Chibnall's plan was to have the death particle triggered when the Doctor was still on the planet and wipe everyone out, including the Doctor, and like give the 14th Doctor a completely fresh start. Gallifrey is destroyed to potentially be rebuilt in a new way. The Doctor gets to start again with all of this knowledge now that she, or potentially he, had all these lives before. And basically that would be the arc then that he would pick up for the 14th Doctor. The Doctor's like looking for all this information, trying to piece together of a history that they didn't know that they had. And while I was watching this, I was like, that very much felt like what the original idea behind this may have been. Obviously, I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah, I mean, I think now that you mention it, I think there are definitely hints of that there.
also just like the grand scale of this being on the scale of like way bigger than any of the series finales where the Doctor doesn't regenerate than like in the reboot, like in general. So
Yeah, I mean, it makes me curious to see like how Chibnall's era is going to end. Like, if this is just like the middle of things, like how, is it going to go out on a bigger bang than this? Like,
right.
So a bunch of doctors, especially the revival ones, have had like up to 3 seasons. So do you think series 13 could potentially be the 13th Doctor's last season, or do you think Chibnall will try to have her on for longer?
I could see her staying for 2 more because the seasons are shorter now, and also the production schedule's a lot longer. I could see Jodie sticking around through series 14.
I could see that as well, and I actually want that to happen. The 13th Doctor is now, I'll say definitively, my favorite Doctor. So, yeah.
She's like my 9th favorite, but I really like her.
Whoa.
Right above David Tennant, who's now my 10th favorite.
Fitting.
Fitting.
Wait a minute. I actually never realized that it was David 10 and
You didn't.
I like never
long.
thought of I never thought of that until right now.
Did we?
We might
Did
have
we
said
not
that
make that joke like on the show back then? I'm sure we did.
We might have. I
It's
forgot,
too
though.
low
I
hanging
don't
fruit to miss.
remember.
Oh God. Well, so I also wanted to talk briefly about this theory that I read last night, and I wasn't sold on it at first, but I was thinking about it this morning before the episode we recorded, and I was like, the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of sold on it. Someone was saying on Reddit that this story would have been way more interesting if the Master was the Timeless Child, because then the Master's motivation wouldn't have been that he's upset the Doctor is within him, but that he's upset that he's within all the Time Lords, and that provides motivation for him destroying the Time Lords, not just because they're keeping the secret, but also because they had a part of him that he basically didn't want them to have. And also then it would give him motivation for destroying the Doctor because he didn't want her to have this power as well. And also this would create this duality where the Master is the first Time Lord and the Doctor is the last Time Lord, because Gallifrey gets destroyed during her run, and she always believes she's the last of the Time Lords. So it would create this kind of bookend between the Doctor and the Master. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, that actually would have been pretty cool, but that's not what we get. So
yeah, I think I've seen a theory like that. I've also seen one where someone said the Timeless Child should have been the Master, and the mother, Tectayun, should have been the Doctor. But then it's the Doctor gets kissed by Missy, so...
yeah.
Back to the Future.
Yes, Back to the Future. So can we assume that, like, the Doctor's mother from the end of time is, like, the first Doctor's adoptive mother or something like that?
Well, we never actually find out that she's like his mom, so maybe she's just his daughter. Like, he has to have a grandchild. He must have had a generation in between, and we don't know anything about the Doctor's legitimate like kids. So we're just saying
a generation.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Looms are the best thing Doctor Who has ever had in canon.
Lemons loom like rain.
Oh, wow.
I'll explain that later.
I'll explain that later, pod. Look, now I'm just dropping Doctor Who podcasts. Anyway, yeah, I'm actually like, I've exhausted all of my theories and dissertations on this episode now. So if you guys have anything you want to talk about, anything left, I should say.
Yeah. Well, not pertaining to these episodes, but like, it is kind of weird being on this Trust Your Doctor episode and not having listened to the previous one because it's not out yet.
Yeah, it won't be out till tomorrow. Haha! This happens to all of our guests. They're like, this is weird. Fair.
Yeah, but a funny thing that was mentioned in the Can You Hear Me episode, Keon said he had like a Wendigo obsession, and
oh yes,
it's funny because like I also have kind of a fascination with them.
Great.
Wow.
Yeah, because like in Marvel, it's like the villain that the Hulk fights when he meets Wolverine, and so like years ago I like looked up some stuff about it, and a while after that I watched Hannibal, and there's like this visual representation of like a Wendigo, and it looks really freaky.
Mm-hmm.
And Supernatural also had one, but it didn't look as cool, so I didn't keep watching. And it's also Wendigo mentioned in my friend's books, Moonshadow and the Cases of Inspector Marshall.
Oh, very nice.
So that's weird.
Huh. Yeah, I've never like met or talked to anyone who like knows what a Wendigo is. So yeah, weird.
All right. So unless you guys wanted to mention anything else before we like sign off and whatnot, I have this like short Doctor Who fanfic based on like Trust Your Doctor jokes.
Oh boy. Well, I'm gonna.
I've been waiting for this.
Well, you're gonna have to wait a little longer because we do have a couple comments on YouTube that I want to read, and actually, Mr. Paul Morris has been making these comments. Just made two more on our Fugitive of the June episode, which are relevant to our discussion. So I actually want to go through these comments first, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can go through the Who tube comments.
The YouTube comments. So Paul Morris has been commenting on a couple of our recent episodes, and he probably won't get to see this response for another week, unfortunately. But first off, thank you for giving us these comments, because they're all very interesting. So his first comment goes on about car speedometers in the UK being marked in both miles and kilometers per hour. I'm going to skip that one because I want to get to the other ones. Sorry.
Okay.
So he has one on the arachnids in the UK episode where he says the food being prepared by Yaz's father is pakoras, an Indian snack that is quite common here in the UK, where Indian food enjoys wide popularity. Not a big fan of the episode, which is, in my opinion, by far the weakest of Series 11. I like Yaz's family and didn't have a great problem with the Trump character, but just found the story rather flimsy and the resolution rushed and implausible. Are you really supposed to accept that every mutant spider in the city managed to run back to the hotel in a few minutes, bearing in mind that they must be fairly widespread to not only affect Yaz's neighbor, but also Graham's home? I'm afraid that I tend to agree with Robertson that it was better to shoot the ailing spider rather than leaving it to suffer a slow death from suffocation. Since most of us accept the euthanizing of sick pets, I don't see why the killing of this mutant spider should suddenly raise concerns. As for trapping the rest and condemning them to a lingering death by starvation after presumably cannibalizing their weaker brethren, this doesn't seem to be the Doctor's best thought-out plan. And then he says something interesting related to the whole era. Chibnall doesn't seem to really gain anything from the extra few minutes extra on each episode, which were supposedly the trade-off for a shorter season. Just about every episode has a rushed conclusion, as if the scripts had been written for an hour slot, only to realize when shooting they had to chop out 10 minutes. Sorry. Now we get to what I think is his most interesting comment in the Demons of the Punjab. We talked about Prem fighting for the British and not being sure how this fits into the timeline. So he goes on, the Battle of Singapore, also known as the Fall of Singapore, which pretty much tells you all you need to know about it, was one of the greatest military disasters of World War II for Britain. Singapore was Britain's major stronghold in Southeast Asia and the center of the defense strategy for the British Empire in the Pacific and Asian sphere. Despite having some 85,000 British, actually mainly Indian, with British and Australian contingents, troops on the ground, the battle lasted only 7 days. Almost all the survivors were taken prisoner by the invading Japanese forces. So in short, yes, Indian soldiers fought in all theaters during World War II. If Prem had been in the Battle of Singapore, then he would almost certainly have spent years in a Japanese POW camp. The helmets shown in the flashback are typical of those issued to British forces at the time. He also goes on, Mountbatten was the last Viceroy of India and the first Governor-General of India following independence. He was the uncle of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. He was assassinated by members of the Provisional IRA in 1979. Very interesting history there that I didn't know, obviously not being British, but I appreciate that we have a fan out there who was able to provide that for us.
Yeah, thanks for that. And sorry, what did you say that his name was?
Paul Morris.
Oh, I thought you said Paul Mars, like the Doctor Who writer. And I was like, wait, what?
No.
Like
Paul Morris.
Paul Mars? Got me excited for a second. Not that I'm not excited to get any comment from anyone, but like I was like, wait, what?
I'm excited. Mars? These comments are all very interesting because he's got some history that I think is relevant for Fugitive of the Jejune. But he's got a comment on Praxeus. Adam was on a Soyuz spacecraft for the simple reason that all flights to the ISS, regardless of the nationality of the crew, have used that craft since the retirement of the US shuttles back in 2011. That's a good point, actually. I didn't think about that. Incidentally, Adam was British based on his accent and the fact that the TV news report on the show described as British astronaut Adam Lang, as did the Doctor herself. The patch on his left arm was the Union flag. Shows how much attention I paid to that episode. Okay, so here's the ones that I think are very interesting and I think relevant to our conversation. So this is on Fugitive of the Jejune. When this first aired, my take on the position of the Ruth Doctor was that she was most likely between 2 and 3. Nothing that I've seen or read since then has changed that opinion. The idea that 2 did not actually regenerate immediately after the events of the War Games has a long history dating all the way back to the Doctor Who comic strips in 1967. The so-called Season 6B has been acknowledged on the official BBC web pages in the past, so has some semi-canon status. And then he says, because we talked in that episode, did the classic Doctors actually mention, their position, their numbers, and we couldn't remember. And he says, I don't recall the Doctor ever saying their number in Classic Who, but the Time Lords confirmed at least the first 3 in the 3 Doctors when the President of the Council tells the operator to show me his earliest incarnation and the first Doctor is seen. So that, I think, is the most interesting, because that was something that I didn't remember at all, but does seem to confirm that the First Doctor is allegedly the First Doctor.
As far as plenty of characters seem to know, including the First Doctor himself.
Yeah, and I think in Modern Undead, the Fifth Doctor says he's the fifth one, or something to that effect.
Huh.
Very interesting. So, yeah, thank you, Paul, for reaching out, and I hope that you continue to reach out so that we continue to have things to respond to, especially when you clearly are much more knowledgeable in British history and culture than we are, which makes sense considering we're not from Britain or the UK. Yeah, that's an avenue that actually we never mentioned on the show, that if you do want to communicate with us, you can comment on our YouTube videos, and I do see and read all the comments on the YouTube videos when they come in. So,
right.
So yeah, that's just what I wanted to get in there. Paul's comments, wanted to throw them out there to the crowd, but I'm done now, so we can listen to this fan fiction.
Hit us with it, Stephen.
Okay. Just for the record, this is not indicative of what my original content is like. I actually take time and effort with that. And if I had made this too detailed, it would have taken too long to read through it. So here we go. So Doctor Who, and this is a big start production. Ha 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 ha. Brian Williams was sad, but then he felt less sad when he heard the familiar hum of the TARDIS. It was in the form of a blue police box. The door opened, and he recognized the familiar face of the 11th Doctor. "Doctor?" Brian said. "I thought you were never going to visit again." "So did I. Wasn't sure I could show my face here again after what happened with Amy and Rory. But I found them, Brian, and we can bring them back to the future." "But I thought, trust your doctor. Consequences can be rewritten as long as it's done well." Eager to see his son and daughter-in-law again, Brian did not give it a second thought. He entered the TARDIS. Waiting inside were two robots. "These are K9 and Chameleon," he said to Brian. "Affirmative," K9 said. "Who?" Brian asked. K9 then proceeded to play the theme song for K9 and Company. K9! "Hello, Brian," Chameleon said, taking Brian's shape to demonstrate his ability. After they landed, they went outside and saw a jungle. "Magnificent place, isn't it, Brian? You might find a decorative vegetable to wear around here." Suddenly, some Cybermen showed up. "You will be deleted." They tried firing at Brian, but he ducked and fell down a hill. Once he reached a stable surface, he wandered around, trying to think of how he could get back to the TARDIS to help the Doctor. After a short while, he bumped into two other somewhat elderly men. "I'm Graham. This here is Wolf. You look to me like a Walmart Wolf."
Oh, that's a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. I haven't made one of those jokes in a while.
"I'm Brian. How familiar are you two with this place?" "Not very," Wolf said. "We were abducted and put here." "We're probably being hunted for sport," Graham guessed. "Were you abducted too?" "No," Brian answered. "I came here with my friend. We're looking for my son and my daughter-in-law. My friend's name is... well, he's called the Doctor." Wolf and Graham's eyes lit up. "Time traveler?" Wolf asked. "Yes, you know him?" "Yes," Wolf said, "but it's been so long. Last I saw him, he seemed to be dying." "Last I saw the Doctor," Graham said, "she was doing fine." "She?" Wolf repeated. "Must have changed." Well, the doctor I came with was a young man with a bow tie, Brian explained. That doesn't quite sound exactly like the doctor I know, Wolf said. He wore a trench coat. Well, whichever doctor it is, Graham said. They're a trustworthy friend, so let's find him. Where did you last see him? Brian led the way. But they got lost. They kept yelling out doctor in hopes of finding help. Then they found another old man. Who the hell are you? The old man asked. Who are you? Brian asked. Why, I am the doctor, the first doctor said.
Oh no.
The doctor? But you're so different. I take it that you've seen a future version of myself. Is that correct? Yes, that is in fact correct. You must be the doctor to have come to that conclusion so easily. Now, have any of you seen Steven and Dodo around here?
No.
We've only seen each other, Wolf said. Out of the corner of his eye, Brian saw a familiar face, accompanied by K9 and Chameleon. Doctor! There you are, Brian. Everyone, Brian said. This is the doctor. Another one, anyway. They noticed that this doctor was carrying a gun. Wait a minute, Graham said. Does the doctor use guns? That's irrelevant, the doctor said with a sly smile. I am not the doctor. Good, the first doctor said, because I would not be caught dead wearing a bow tie like that which you wear. You look exactly like the doctor I know, Brian said. Who are you then? Some call me Alex, but really, I'm Skynet. If you survive this game, then you will witness the genesis of the Terminators.
Oh no.
Dun 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 dun. Alex took the form of a Terminator. Chameleon followed suit. His eyes turned red, and so did K9's. Alex/Skynet charged his gun. Suddenly, a man rocking a formal outfit that included a pink blazer showed up, driving the yellow car Bessie, and accompanied by Amy. The bald man in the pink blazer grabbed the gun out of the Terminator's hands and threw it aside. Then he grabbed the artificial face and ripped it off, revealing the metal skull beneath. He punched it until it was no more. Then he used a sonic screwdriver to fix Chameleon, who reverted back to his original form. Then he fed K9 a canine snack that made him feel better. Amy? Brian asked. Yes, Amy said. It's me. Where's Rory? Sorry, I'm just trying to get the voice right.
Oh no.
That's what we're trying to find out, the man in the pink blazer said. I see you've all met the first doctor. Have we met? The first doctor asked. Kinda. When are you from? What's the last thing you remember? I bit into some sweets, the first doctor said, and then suddenly I was here. I have no idea where my assistants have gone. How do your teeth feel? Do they hurt? What are you, a tooth fairy? He could be a dentist, Graham said. Dentist who? The first doctor asked. Everyone? Amy said. This is the doctor. Another one, anyway. I'm your future self. You won't remember after all this. And if I'm right, then you just faced the Celestial Toy Maker. This is another one of his games. Ah, yes. I had a feeling that we'd bump into him again. Didn't realize it'd be this soon. But then again, why would he disappear all of a sudden? He looks so different now. Looks like Rocky and has gone by the name Sebastian. Years ago, the toy makers started dabbling in video games, even catching the attention of spy kids from the OSS. This even led to the downfall of the guy, also known as Beck, from a game called Tron. I see, the first doctor said. What game has he placed us in? It's a game called the new doctor looked up at the sky, uttering the title of this episode, Humanji. And Jack Black appeared with a guitar and yelled, "Rock on!" before playing the Doctor Who theme. Doctor Who, Doctor Who. Introducing Dwayne Johnson as Rockter Who. So Big Finish, go ahead and finish this.
Big Finish, take it away.
Take it out of our sight and inject it into our ears.
Well, that was great.
The Rock as the Doctor confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, what can I even say? Truly amazing.
This is what happens when you listen to too many Trust Your Doctor episodes in quarantine.
Hey, the whole backlog is about 2 weeks, so if you wanted to, if you come down with COVID-19 and need something to pass the time while lying in bed hacking your lungs out,
we're here for you.
We're always here for you.
In this pandemic, trust your doctor.
Well, I'm just glad that the memes we've started over the years have lived on and become part of this wacky universe.
Yeah, someone should get on that Trust Your Doctor wiki.
Oh, God.
Oh, no. Decorative vegetable wiki so that people can keep track of all the in-jokes that cross podcasts, too.
I was actually
all
thinking...
All the podcasts are in the same universe.
I was actually thinking of adding a memes page to the site just to log all of the in-jokes we've had over the years. So maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, you do that on your 18-hour work days.
Yeah, exactly. But what I have actually been fitting into my 18-hour work days is I've actually started writing my own Doctor Who fan fiction, which I've written Doctor Who fan fiction before. The
Lava Pirates.
Absolutely, Lava Pirates. But this time I'm actually trying to make it good and like actually serious. And it's difficult, one, because I'm super busy, and two, because like I haven't actually written any fiction since like one random Frankenstein fanfic I wrote in 2018. And before that, it was also years before I'd written anything before that. But yeah,
probably Lava Pirates before that.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
fiction takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult. And I'm a writer. Like that's my job, but I'm not a fiction writer whatsoever. So like it's actually really difficult. But I'm trying to make it as good as I can. So I'll share that in the coming, or whenever I have time to finish it. I thought it was going to be short, but it's not. Yeah, it actually started. So I don't want to go too deep into this, but it started from my idea for the Blake 7 Series E that we did on Zenith, episode 54. But it sort of evolved from there. So there are definitely like Blake 7 light concepts in it. But I'll try and share that with anyone who's interested whenever I finish it.
Well, now I'm excited.
And I want to read your novel, Stephen, by the way. I know this has nothing to do with like the episode anymore, but like I do. I want to read it.
Well, I mean, we're probably going into plugs pretty soon now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right now. Now is your opportunity, Stephen, to plug yourself. This is the perfect segue. Thank you, Keon.
Right, this is a perfect outlet for the plugs. So I'm a novelist. My first novel that's out is called Lemons Loom Like Rain. It's a fantasy horror comedy novel. So college students dealing with like social anxieties and murders, werewolves, vampire, supernatural stuff. It's available on Amazon. You can also go to stevenshinder.com to look up more info on it. Join the email list. And I also have a Facebook page called Steven Shinder Storytelling. And you can also follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter for whatever – punny things I care to share, I guess.
Is there a digital version of your novel, Stephen?
Yes, it's available in both paperback and ebook form on Amazon.
Awesome. Because I don't want to clog up the system by buying anything mail-wise online these
You
days.
probably should buy things online and have them delivered to you because the US Postal Service is going under not because it's overwhelmed, but because it has no money because no one's posting things anymore.
Huh. That's
Well, right
interesting.
now the paperback is like $11.95 at the moment, and the ebook is $2.99.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm working on the next book in my whenever I get back in the writerly mindset. It's still set in the same universe under the Standalones and Stepping Stones umbrella, but it's not like a direct sequel. Like trying to make it so that each of these stories can more or less stand on their own, but they'll have connections. And the next one is called Trespassing Through the Visages. So I guess
Nice.
keep an eye out for that.
Well, on that note, I guess it's time for us to plug ourselves. You can find us, if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorative.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on everything. Since we're finished now, we're done. It's the end. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And, we've been mentioning in recent weeks that we're going to dive straight into Torchwood. And we are going to be doing that very soon, but we've actually decided to watch the Peter Cushing movies.
Nice.
Yeah, for the next couple episodes. There's 2 of them, I think. So we'll do one next week and one the week after, and then we'll probably go into Torchwood.
Yep.
Probably.
So expect that next week. But until then, the end.